Good afternoon, everybody, and happy VE Day. It is great to be able to share with you an assembly. It's sad that I'm not with you, although we probably wouldn't be at school if it was actually a school day. Normally it would be a bank holiday and we'd all be at home enjoying ourselves, and as it is, we're all at home anyway, although there are some children in school. We've got 16 children in today, but most of us at Turnham are all at home. You can see I'm at home. I'm filming this in my kitchen, at my kitchen table, but I thought I would do an assembly that I would do normally with you. So let's start with good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on when you're watching this. Today's a really special day. It is VE Day, and it's not only VE Day, which is Victory in Europe Day, which I'm going to talk to you all about. It's actually 75 years today since this happened, and that's why there's lots of people all around the country celebrating today, and you might have seen it on the television if you've been watching. VE Day, Victory in Europe Day, took place on the 8th of May 1945. It was a public holiday and a day of celebration to mark German surrender to the Allied forces, so our side that we were fighting for. We won the Second World War. And VE, which is V for victory, E for Europe, Victory in Europe Day, marked the formal end of the war in Europe and brought end to the war that had lasted for 6 years. That's 6 years of suffering and courage and endurance and resilience of the people fighting it and the people who were living through it in all of those countries. Did you know the war in Europe was over where we live, because England is part of the United Kingdom, which is part of the world called Europe. It was finished where we were, but there were other countries still fighting until the 2nd of September 1945, which was when Japan surrendered. So at home, what I'd like you to do with whoever you're watching with, or with somebody in your family, I would like you to have a little think about how you think it would have felt when the war finally ended after 6 years. And you could have a little think about what it feels like now. We're not in a war at the moment, but we are fighting. We're fighting against coronavirus in the world, which is why we're having to stay at home and do our part in the fight against this illness. And so think about how you're going to feel when this is finished, which is going to be in a few months probably, compared to what it might have felt like after 6 long years of life looking very, very different, and there a war happening around the world. What do you think you might have felt like? Have a little think or talk about it. However, on VE Day 75 years ago today, it was time to celebrate. The war was over. People ran out into the streets. They were hanging bunting and they were putting banners up and dancing and having parties. The church bells were ringing all around the country to share the news and to celebrate peace in Europe. Everyone brought out food into the street and they had tables. Do you remember a couple of years ago, if you were at Turnham, we had a street party in our playground to celebrate the new building, and it would have been like that in everybody's streets all over the country. Tuesday, May the 8th, which is today, was to be a national day of celebration. Victory in Europe Day, VE Day, and today is 75 years to the day. The capital city, where we live in London, was the place to be on VE Day. Anyone who could reach the city, they all travelled to get here. The centre of London was full of people wearing red and white and blue, waving flags, the Union Jack, and dancing and singing, and fireworks filled the sky with flashes of light. Wonder if you would like to try something at home as well. I wonder if you could imagine that you had been there on that day. 6 years. You probably, your dads might have been away fighting, or your uncles or your older brothers might have been at war. There was very little food. People had to ration, which means there wasn't a lot of milk, hardly any fruit or vegetables to be seen. Life would have looked very different. A lot of children from London had to go and live in the countryside with other families. They had to leave their families in order to be safe from the bombing and the time of war and the way that it was affecting London. And so your lives would have looked really different, a little bit like they look different now, but different sets of circumstances. So you could write a postcard. Imagine you were there on that day when victory was claimed and everybody was celebrating, what it would have been like, and you could write a postcard to a family member telling them who missed it, telling them about the VE celebrations, and you could draw a picture on the other side of the paper to show what you did and what you saw. You could use your imagination. You can have a go at that task after you've watched this video. The German war is therefore at an end. That was something that was said. There were words that people had been waiting 6 years to hear. On VE Day, everyone, both in London at home, they didn't have TVs, they didn't have the internet, they didn't have Google and phones and iPads. They just had wireless sets, which were like old radios, and they would all crowd around the radio, and they wanted to hear from one man, and that's this man, Winston Churchill. He was the Prime Minister at the time. I wonder if you know the name of our Prime Minister now. Because actually, right now is the first time probably in my life that we've been really waiting to see what the Prime Minister says, because the Prime Minister at the moment is making big decisions about how we can act and things that we can do, both at school, so both for my job and your school, but also in our personal lives about whether we can go outside and how we can see our friends. And we wait to listen to what he says. And do you know what his name is? It's Boris Johnson. But in the war at this time, 75 years ago, people would have been sitting around the radio waiting to see what he says. And this is Winston Churchill. And at 3 p.m, the Prime Minister broadcast to the nation, to the whole country, that the war was over for the British people. They would have been so relieved and happy. Churchill said, and these are really famous words that he said, "My dear friends, this is your hour. This is not a victory of a party or of any class. It's a victory of the great British nation as a whole." And I know I keep saying it, but when I'm thinking about this and when I'm talking to you about it, it makes me think that it's very similar to what we're doing now. We're working together as a nation. It's not just one person, it's not just one part of government or political party, it's not just one type of people, it's all of us working together to fight against this virus and to be victorious. This is not a victory of party or class, it's a victory of the great British nation as a whole. That was a knock at my door. I'm going to ignore it for the moment. This is your victory. Shortly after Churchill, the Prime Minister, spoke, the King at the time, so at the moment we have a Queen, and again she's been speaking to us throughout this time. Do you know what her name is? Because she's in these pictures. I don't know if you can spot her because she looks really different now, because this was 75 years ago, remember? She was a young lady then. But after that, after the Prime Minister spoke, the King George VI, there he is, he came out and with his 2 daughters, Elizabeth and Margaret, her sister. So we've got the King and Queen, but she was the Queen Mother now because they're the mum and dad of our Queen. And then you've actually got our Queen here, Queen Elizabeth, but she looks really different. She's wearing an army uniform because she was part of the army at the time. And they came out on Buckingham Palace balcony, which they often do still now as a family if there's a special occasion. And Churchill told the crowds again, this is your victory, everybody. The King and Queen came out on VE Day 8 times, which is really unusual. And I was thinking you could also try this activity. You've got video, you've got a camera like me, I'm making a film here, or I could record it on my voice. You could make your own radio broadcast announcing victory in Europe. You can imagine you were the Prime Minister. What would you say to people after they'd been through such a difficult time and you were celebrating the end of it? You could even pretend to be Winston Churchill. If you Google Winston Churchill radio addresses, there are so many famous speeches that he made. He was quite an inspirational man at the time. He didn't do everything right. He wasn't perfect. However, he made some really important speeches during this time. Oops, just going to go backwards. I flicked too quickly there. When, I've just said this, so when the Queen came out on her balcony, she was wearing her uniform because she'd been fighting, well, she'd been part of the war effort. But this was quite funny, and I didn't know this, and I learnt this today when I was putting this together for you. When the princesses, and they were young at that time, when they saw the celebrations and they were up on the balcony, and normally the royal family doesn't come and be part of what everybody else is doing, but they were so excited, the princesses asked their parents if her and her sister Margaret could go and join the crowds, and actually the King and Queen agreed, and the two princesses, so our Queen now, they pretended and they snuck out amongst the crowds, and they had the party with the crowds, and no one noticed that there were some princesses among them because they were all so busy celebrating. So if you were listening carefully, let's see if you can answer some of the quiz questions correctly. So, on what date was Victory in Europe Day? So remember, I said it was today 75 years ago. Was it May the 7th, 1945, May the 8th, 2015, May the 8th, 1945, or May the 8th, 2005? What do you think? 3, 2, 1. Did you get it right? The right answer is May the 8th, 1945, 75 years ago today. Okay, why did people wear red, white and blue when they were out and celebrating in the streets? Was it because they are the colours of the German flag? Is it because that was all they could find to wear? Is it because they looked so pretty in those colours? Or is it because they are the colours of the Union flag? What do you think? 3, 2, 1. Did you get it right? It is because they are the colours of the Union flag. Next one. Who mingled secretly with the crowds on VE Day? Was it Princess Elizabeth and Princess Margaret, Winston Churchill, King George VI, or Neville Chamberlain? Were you listening? 3, 2, 1. What do you think? Did you get it right? It was Princess Elizabeth and Princess Margaret. I think this is the last one. Why did people ring church bells? I said this right at the beginning. Did they ring them for practice? To spread the news and celebrate? Because they are tuneful? Or to tell the time? What do you think? 3, 2, 1. It was to spread the news and celebrate. Now, what I want you to have a little think about as we finish is, in his VE Day speech, he said lots of things. But one of the other things he said, Winston Churchill, he said, do not despair. Do not yield to violence and tyranny. March straight forward. Some tricky words in there. What he's saying is, do not despair, do not give up, do not be sad, do not feel let down, do not feel like there's no hope, do not yield to violence. It means don't give in to those that are being horrible to you. Don't give in to bullies or people that are acting in a hurtful way towards you, or tyranny, those people that want to tell you what to do even though you know that it's not the right thing. Don't do any of that, but march straight forward. Keep going. Show your resilience and your perseverance. Those were his pieces of advice leading on from when the war ended. And what I want you to have a think about is, how can you keep going when you face difficult or worrying times? And I don't think there's more of a good question for us to think about at the moment, because we are in a difficult and worrying time right now. So can we follow his advice? Don't despair, don't give up, don't feel that you're let down, don't give in, but march straight forward. Keep going, be hopeful, there is hope. How do you help yourself through difficult times? And I know there's so many different ways, and when we have difficult times at school, we often end up talking about it and using our zones of regulation and thinking about, how can I calm myself down, how can I get myself back into that green zone, that zone of feeling content and happy and ready. How are you doing that for yourself now? There are lots of different ways to do it, and actually on our website, if you haven't had a look, there is a section, a folder, where under home learning there's a folder around emotional healthiness. And remember, we talked about that. We talked about how we can be emotionally healthy and keeping our feelings healthy. And also Miss Mejias is recording some videos on here as well, looking at some zones of regulation activities that you could do, and there's lots of things on the website about that as well. And so we're going through a difficult time, just like those people back 75 years ago were going through a difficult time. But today is a special day. Today is 75 years since victory in Europe was declared, and everybody all over the country was celebrating. So it's been lovely talking to you. I will hopefully speak to you again soon. Do look at our other videos on the YouTube channel. And the last thing I want to say to you all is a very happy VE Day. Bye.